Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Friday, June 26th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amitha Sharma. For the first time, Governor Gavin Newsom is urging a California county to reinstate the stay-at-home order. Here in San Diego County, we set yet another daily record with 440 new COVID-19 cases reported. 6 more people also died from the virus. As KPBS reporter John Carroll tells us, the situation is even more dire in Imperial County.
Governor Newsom held his Friday news conference at Tri-Tool, an industrial tool manufacturer in the Sacramento area. The reason for that in just a minute, but first the big news from the governor today, news that hits close to home.
We have now had over 500 individuals transferred out of the hospital system in Imperial County just over the last 5 weeks.
When COVID-19 hit Imperial County, it hit hard, and it's never let up. Unlike San Diego, Imperial County never met the thresholds of being able to move forward in reopening. Now they're sliding even further back.
We are working with county officials and advising them to pull back and once again reinstitute their stay-at-home orders.
Newsom says if the county doesn't move ahead with reinstituting the stay-at-home orders, he'll do it for them. The reasons for that are as numerous as they are depressing. A hospital system that's overloaded. Positivity rates in COVID testing over the last 2 weeks, 5.3% statewide, but in Imperial County, 23%. The governor says the state is now surging support beyond what it already provides into the county. Field hospitals are set up. 44 National Guardsmen are on hand to help where they're needed. On a more positive note, Newsom today announced a new initiative to help California's manufacturing industries and a website to go with it, safelymakingca.org. More than 300 California companies are on the website already. The governor says the idea is to help customers from around the world to find just what they need. The state is providing free personal protective equipment to all companies taking part to help ensure safe workplaces. Newsom swung back around to COVID concerns toward the end of his news conference. He's worried about the upcoming July 4th holiday weekend, and he sounded almost exasperated when asked if he thought Californians understood the urgency of the moment.
I don't know what more evidence we need. 79 human beings lost their lives, 79 families torn apart because they lost a loved one just in the last 24 hours. What more evidence do you need?
John Carroll, KPBS News.
County officials have shut down another restaurant for not complying with COVID-19 orders. Health officials say Hernandez Hideaway in Escondido failed to meet health code requirements. The restaurant can reopen once a revised plan shows that sanitation and social distancing standards can be met. The owner reportedly told health officials he will not require his staff to wear masks or comply with preventative measures. What happens after someone tests positive for COVID-19 at a restaurant? It happened earlier this week at an eatery in Oceanside. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman spoke to the owner, who was having to make some tough decisions.
Tuesday we found out, immediately closed.
Cameron Brazelton says earlier this week 2 of his employees at Mission Avenue Bar and Grill in Oceanside tested positive for COVID-19.
Both asymptomatic.
Brazelton didn't have to close, but decided to temporarily shut his doors to do some deep cleaning.
So I actually got a company to come in here and disinfect that day. Your first thought is taking care of your staff, Take care of my staff, take care of everybody that's in here.
Mission Avenue closed completely for about a month when the pandemic first hit, before reopening for takeout. Brazelton says he nearly shut down for good.
We ended up getting the PPP loan. We got the second round, but it was getting very close to that point.
He reopened for dine-in around Memorial Day and says they've been following all reopening guidelines.
As far as I'm concerned, we've been doing everything as best we can.
Brazelton says the restaurant lost a third of its seating, spacing out tables. They require face coverings to come inside, and they're doing their best to have staff physically distance.
This is a small place, we're a small staff. When those employees are working, there's no way you can't be around somebody.
Mission Avenue is not the first restaurant to temporarily close after staff tested positive.
Unfortunately, I think that's going to be the cost of doing business at this point, until maybe a vaccine comes through.
The question is, can restaurants afford to close and sanitize every time someone tests positive?
I feel safe doing that, and I feel like it's the responsible thing to do. And yeah, it cost us a week in sales. I'm having to pay for all these tests. I'm having to pay for somebody to come in here and disinfect. You can only do that so much.
Brazelton says we're all in this together, from customers to servers and bartenders.
I pass it along and urge everybody, when you're out, just follow the rules, wear a mask, social distance, be as safe as you can.
This is not considered a COVID-19 outbreak, as that's 3 or more cases, but that could change. Brazelton is having the rest of his staff tested right now and plans to reopen once they all have negative results. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
2 prominent local politicians say they will self-quarantine after being exposed to COVID-19. County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher and State Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez say they tested negative, but were in contact with someone who tested positive. The 2 are married. Fletcher has been a face of the county's COVID-19 response as a co-chair of the county's task force. 1 month after George Floyd's death at the hands of police sparked worldwide protests, the Minneapolis City Council is taking the first official step to disband the police department. Today, the council unanimously approved a proposal to change the city charter. In place of a police department, they're proposing a Department of Community Safety and Violence Prevention. The amendment says it will take a holistic, public health-oriented approach. It also provides for a law enforcement division with licensed officers.
Of course, we still have to have an emergency response for those situations that are difficult to de-escalate. But I think that it's important for us to keep in perspective that most of what police do is not respond to violent situations.
Ultimately, it's the voters who would have to decide to start the conversation about a new public safety system. Through a lengthy legislative process, the council intends to get their charter amendment on the ballot in November. The San Diego Police Department has released a new policy requiring officers to use de-escalation techniques. It came after 2 years of work and was hustled to the finish line by recent police protests. KPBS reporter Claire Tregeser talked to experts and activists about the new policy.
I don't see anything revolutionary or radical in either policy.
Kevin Davis is a use of force expert and trainer who has worked in law enforcement for 38 years.
They tend to be average policies, I would say, or those would fit in with industry standards in terms of use of force, de-escalation, and issues such as the duty of an officer to intervene if they see an excessive use of force.
Davis also says the tactics outlined in the policy aren't anything new. They include creating a buffer zone between an officer and a subject and attempting to establish trust. He says the wording is favorable to police officers by including the caveat that de-escalation be used, quote, when safe and reasonable to do so.
The officer attempts or tries to elicit control or get control, but it's entirely up to the suspect.
But Darwin Fishman with the Racial Justice Coalition says those disclaimers diminish the policy to the point of making it meaningless.
To me, it looks toothless. Like, what's the consequences if they don't de-escalate? What's the consequences if they don't intervene with another officer that's using excessive force?
He says the policy follows the old model of policing.
They give commands, and if you don't follow them, then they need to escalate and use violence.
Other departments, including Berkeley and Baltimore, already have similar policies requiring police to attempt de-escalation first. 4 years ago, Berkeley started a comprehensive training program with all its officers to bring de-escalation techniques into all aspects of policing, including the buffer zone tactic that San Diego will now use. Claire Tregasser, KPBS News.
The San Diego Police Department tells KPBS the outcome of an internal investigation into a controversial arrest of a Black Lives Matter protester will remain secret. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler has the story.
This is an unmarked car! Who is this?
You might recall this video of a young Black Lives Matter protester taken by a group of armed men who didn't identify themselves.
You follow us, you will get shot. You understand me?
These men, it turned out, were San Diego police officers. City Council President Georgette Gomez quickly called for an investigation into the incident, and Police Chief Dave Nislight said it had already begun. But now the San Diego Police Department tells KPBS that the outcome of that investigation will remain secret. In a statement, an SDPD spokesperson said that we do not make public findings made by our internal affairs unit because they are personnel investigations. He also said state law prohibited the release of any findings. Retired Assemblywoman Lori Saldana, who worked on reforms to the state's transparency laws, told KPBS that internal investigations like this prevent the public from learning about possible misconduct. She's filed a Public Records Act request to find out more about the incident.
When you abduct a young woman in front of her panicked friends, in front of a high school in San Diego in the middle of the night, throw her into a car, you are not identifying yourself as police officers, you're not identifying yourself with badge numbers or any other reasonable forms of identification. Is that effective policing? And I think that's the question.
City Council President Gomez told KPBS that after the conclusion of the internal investigation, she will be asking for the findings to be made public.
Where are you going? Where are you going? Help us! Help us! Who is this?
Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
The Poway Unified School District Board has unanimously approved an anti-racism resolution. It comes after an Instagram page called Black in PUSD anonymously shared experiences with racism at campuses. The district says it is committed to creating diverse curriculum and hiring diverse staff. Administrators will also look into anti-racist and anti-bias training for staff members and students. The resolution doesn't offer a timeline for the goals. A federal panel of judges has ruled that the Trump administration's use of Pentagon money to build the border wall is unconstitutional. Today, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the administration illegally sidestepped Congress when it directed $2.5 billion for military construction projects. That money funded a section of the wall under construction in the Otay Mountain wilderness. The Southern Border Communities Coalition is one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit challenging the construction.
We will continue this fight to, even if it's built, our next step will be to push for it to be torn down and for the parts of the border and for our border communities to be restored, and particularly the areas where there's been a lot of environmental damage already.
The Supreme Court had already stayed any lower court's rulings on the matter. It will now decide whether it wants to review the decision. Amid the pandemic, the Trump administration is once again asking the Supreme Court to end Obamacare. The Affordable Care Act enabled millions of Americans to get health insurance. In a new filing, the Justice Department argues that the ACA should be nullified if the law's individual coverage mandate and two key provisions are invalidated. The justices will hear arguments in the case sometime next term. Our partners at iNewsSource recently reported that the San Diego VA is removing suicidal veterans from a life-saving drug and transitioning them to a controversial nasal spray. Now, iNewsSource investigative reporter Brad Racino has found the VA is lying about its reasons.
After the San Diego VA began taking veterans off ketamine injections at a private clinic in La Jolla, we asked why. The drug was working for the vets, who swore by its effectiveness in treating their depression. The agency's responses were conflicting and false. At first, the VA claimed it could offer similar services at its La Jolla hospital. Records we obtained show that isn't true. The VA also said they had talked about a transition plan with the vets, whose lives would be upended by this decision. Emails and interviews with veterans don't back that up.
If anybody cared about us. It's the only time would be if 10 of us kill ourselves at one time.
Tom Johan is a 73-year-old Air Force veteran in Ramona. He has tried everything to help with his depression and suicidal thoughts. Nothing worked until he found ketamine.
My mind was refreshed. I could think. I had compassion. I could see colors. I wasn't afraid to be around people.
Johan is one of many vets being pulled off ketamine and put on Spravato, a nasal spray alternative they say isn't working for them. Those who've tried and failed the VA treatments are now desperate to return to the private clinic, but the VA is saying no.
I'm angry. I am full of rage.
Last week, the VA abruptly gave a different reason for switching the vets. It said the private clinic administering the drug was giving it through an injection and not an IV. Because that's not what the VA had authorized, the clinic can't treat the veterans. Again, the agency's records show that isn't true. VA psychiatrists and its top administrators have repeatedly authorized the injections.
We've had enough. Enough is enough.
The House Veterans Affairs Committee is looking into what's happening in San Diego, and local members of Congress are aware of the situation. But veterans like Johan continue to come forward, hoping someone will take action. The VA will not respond to questions about its contradictory or false statements and is continuing with a plan to remove all veterans from the clinic by the end of September. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource investigative reporter Brad Racino.
If you or someone you know is considering suicide, call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. A call for help today when it comes to addressing family homelessness and a lack of COVID-19 resources. Local activists gathered in Old Town to call attention to the need for more funding or face what they call the dire consequences involving children and those with disabilities. The nonprofit Hotel Vouchers for All relies on private donations, and they say that money has run out. They say the county is failing its most vulnerable.
$5 million a month could have provided thousands of people with permanent housing with wraparound supports, and our elected officials put them in a jumbo shelter, put them in harm's way, also had people test positive, COVID-19 positive, while they were in that jumbo shelter, knowing that this would happen.
The group says although the county set up the convention center as a shelter, it is not available to families or those with health concerns that make them high risk for COVID. It looks like we're in for one more day of warm weather before a cool down comes through. Jeff Cornish has your weekend forecast.
Well, we have lots going on over the next 3 to 5 days here in Southern California. Now, today to tomorrow, not many changes. Still hot across the interior, and we've been dealing with some heat across the interior. So we had a hot one today, and we're going to stay hot tomorrow. But the big changes come in on Sunday and into Monday with a big trough, really pronounced dip in the jet stream, setting up shop. And as that rolls in from the north and west, will turn windy, but then cooler. So we have some fire danger concerns across the southwest in general because of the increasing wind Sunday and into the far eastern part of the region into Monday. But we'll turn a lot cooler. And there might even be a few sprinkles near the coast and into some of the high ground on Monday. So our greatest risk of fire danger in Southern California is really going to be on Sunday. There is some pretty mild air still in place tonight in the cooler spots like Ramona, 56 degrees, 59 at Mount Laguna. But Borrego Springs stays real warm, 78 for your low tonight, 64s, Chula Vista, and into San Diego. Still hot across the interior tomorrow. Cool for the coast, typical Southern California setup here for us for a Saturday afternoon. But there are changes that will soon brew. So we'll be around 108 still in Borrego Springs, 78 in Mount Laguna, 87 into Ramona and El Cajon, and around 72 into San Diego, with some low clouds in the morning and then the brighter sky in the afternoon. Here's our windy setup into Sunday and Sunday night. It may not be overly windy at the coast, but it will be very windy in the interior, especially into the high ground and across the deep interior part, the Great Basin especially. We'll see gusts of wind up to near 70 miles per hour in the highest of elevations, with some of the wind on our Sunday. Early next week, much cooler, pleasant weather. The dip in the jet stream will be here. So as we look at the forecasts, coastal areas, could be a little drizzle or mist Monday morning. That'll be a nice change. And as we step into the inland areas, falling from 83 to 73, relief there on Monday. That'll be nice. Into the mountains, falling into the low 60s for highs on a breezy Monday. And the deserts drop from 108 down to 89 on Monday. Enjoy that. I'm meteorologist Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
Antibodies are not the body's only weapons against the coronavirus. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani reports the body also has special immune cells, and Salk scientists say they can be activated more easily than previously thought.
Our bodies have biological warriors, like antibodies, which can fight a virus. And we also have T cells. These white blood cells flare up when the body is infected with a pathogen and get rid of the cells that are infected, so the body can stay healthy, says Salk immunobiologist Susan Keck.
And so when the T cells see these differences, see these bits and pieces of the virus, that actually activates them. And then they have the ability to expand and multiply.
The lung is where respiratory diseases like coronavirus can thrive. So Keck and her team have been studying how easily these cells can be reactivated in the lung. In studies of the influenza virus in mice, Keck and her team saw that these T cells in the lung could recognize the virus and be reactivated more easily than previously thought.
There are T cells, specifically these memory T cells that are able to live for very long periods of time after the first infection. And these memory T cells can live a long term inside our lungs.
T cells in other parts of the body are currently being used in some treatments for diseases like blood cancer, but they still aren't widely used. So now her team is focusing on how the research and how T cells could be safely used in vaccine design for respiratory diseases like COVID-19.
A lot of the vaccines that we get, such as the childhood vaccines, the protection they provide are largely based on antibodies. But in some cases, we know that the antibodies may not be enough.
Keck says it's important to use a mixture of tools against coronavirus. And she says killer T cells can have some negative side effects, like killing too many cells in the body. So she says it's important to do more studies on how to harness their power effectively. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
CVS Health added 3 more COVID-19 drive-through testing sites in San Diego County today. The new locations are in Ramona, Imperial Beach, and the city of San Diego. 14 others are also open across the county. The free tests are sent to a lab for results and returned in about 3 days. You can register online at cvs.com. Like the idea of an empty middle seat when you start flying again? Don't get used to it. United and Spirit already made the move to book flights to capacity. American Airlines says they'll be booking middle seats starting July 1st. The airline will let you know ahead of time that you're booked next to someone. That way you can choose a more open flight if you'd like. As coronavirus cases spike across the U.S., the European Union will bar Americans from traveling to member states. The U.S. is among dozens of countries excluded once the EU reopens its borders July 1st. Countries on the safe list include Australia, Canada, and South Korea. Tourist attractions here in California are slowing down reopening plans. SDSU's Miro Kopik has more in this Friday's Business Report.
Fundamentally, the growth in coronavirus cases is forcing Disney to delay its opening from July 17th to a future date. They're waiting for guidance from the state of California about reopening rules. Disney's lost millions of dollars in profits. They've got tens of thousands of workers who are waiting to come back. But the union here in Southern California, representing 17,000 workers at Disneyland, sent a letter to the governor and said, hey, we don't think it's a good idea to open at this time, given the explosion of COVID cases. The one part of the park that is going to open is going to be the downtown Disney. Those can open under the restaurant and retail guidance that the state has already set out. So that's scheduled to open July the 9th. The other part of Disney is going to be Florida. That's actually scheduled to open on July 11th. And given that Florida's COVID rise has been proportionally greater than that in California, we'll see if that date is still going to hold as well.
Facebook announced today that it will flag all newsworthy posts from politicians that break its rules, and that includes those from President Trump. CEO Mark Zuckerberg had previously refused to take action against the president's posts, suggesting mail-in ballots will lead to voter fraud. However, Twitter had put a fact-check label on those tweets. Zuckerberg said Facebook is taking more steps to counter election-related misinformation. The historic Hotel del Coronado is back open, ending the first closure in its 132-year history. The famous resort closed along with other hotels in late March. It reopened today with limited amenities and reduced occupancy. The hotel's main pool and cabana guest rooms will remain closed until at least July 19th.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, despite a pandemic and a coming election, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to invalidate Obamacare. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Now for an update on our top story. Governor Gavin Newsom is urging Imperial County to reinstate the stay-at-home order. Here in San Diego County, we set yet another daily record with 440 new COVID-19 cases reported. 6 more people also died from the virus. You can find tonight's stories on our KPBS website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley. And by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.